everybody? What's up? Welcome back to the Get Back. I'm Daniel. This is the third episode of our weekly NHL recap show. Talking about all things hockey. Love it here. We're going to have a great week. It's January 17th now, as it's now Saturday, January 17th. And we're just going to go right into the show. Not a lot of news to really kind of get into this week, so we're going to kind of focus on a couple of games that happened as well throughout the week as we get ready for the Olympics and the trade deadline coming up. And I want to start with a team near and dear to my heart, the New York Rangers. What has happened to them? What is going on there? Now, when I first started the show, I really didn't want to kind of make this too, Ranger heavy. I didn't want to show any bias. It wasn't really about that. But when this team is this bad as it is right now, and everything going on is so dysfunctional, we kind of have to talk about it. So let's talk about it. So the Rangers are currently 2-8 in their last 10. They've lost 5 in a row. That includes a 10-2 loss. Yes, a 10-2 loss to Boston, a 4-2 loss at home to the Seattle Kraken, and recently an 8-4 loss to the Ottawa Senators, in which I was in attendance for, unfortunately. But no, MSG is great. Love that place. So what has really gone wrong here? They fired, Pierre Laviolette to start the season. They brought in Mike Sullivan. They traded for JT Miller. Chris Drury, the GM, came out and said we're going to try to be competitive. And granted, they were. They're 20 and 22. So it's not necessarily like a terrible record, but they currently sit last place in both the Metro and the Atlantic Conference, the Eastern Conference. It just has not been a good year. From all standpoints that you look at this team, defensively, offensively, they can't score, they can't defend. Goaltending has been an issue so far this year. And, there's a lot of finger pointing going around, right? You look to Igor Shesterkin being injured for a long time and Jonathan Quick not stepping up. You can look at Adam Fox, probably their best defensive player, being hurt for a majority of the year. He not being healthy is also causing a problem. But when I think you look at the overall construction of this team, you have a clear disconnect into what this team is supposed to be. You have plenty of young guys like Gabe Perreault, Brendan Othman, Alexis Lafreniere, and you have a lot of veterans like Mika Zibanejad, Trocheck, Terry Panarin, JT Miller, players like that, right? And I think part of the issue stems from not creating that identity into what you want to be. Are we a young team that's rebuilding, or are we a veteran team trying to win? What are we, right? And I think Chris Drury doesn't know because of what happened in the previous year. And let's go on a bit of a history lesson here to how we got to this point. So, obviously, you had the 2023 playoffs where the Rangers went to the Eastern Conference Finals, eventually losing that game to the Florida Panthers in 7. And everything seemed pretty okay. And then you had reports in the locker room that there was some issues in the locker room. Jacob Trouba was a part of the problem, and that he was the issue. Barclay Goodrow got cut. That caused some tensions between the management and the team. And Jacob Trouba spoke out, and eventually Trouba ended up getting traded to the Anaheim Ducks. That lost majority of your leadership, right? He was your captain. He was your emotional leader. He got the guys fired up, and you lost that. You go into 2024, the 2025 season, you don't really have a real veteran leader. Chris Kreider is probably your best player, and he's speaking out. Mika Zibanejad is underperforming. A lot of players are underperforming, and you end up having a very disappointing year under Pierre Laviolette, right? And then comes out, Chris Kreider wants to be traded. He gets traded to Anaheim. You lose another leader, another veteran guy, another clubhouse guy, and your culture in effectively 2 years has been shattered by Chris Drury, right? So when that happens, you need to make a move. You need to bring in somebody who you've identified, Chris Drury, the GM of the New York Rangers and the president of the team, that you can identify as being the culture changer, as the guy who could come in here and replace and restart this franchise and kickstart into a new era, right? And you identified this guy as 33-year-old JT Miller, right? Formerly on the Canucks, and you bring in JT Miller. You trade a pick. You give them a young prospect, a fan favorite in Filipino. You give him a first-round pick. You give him a lot of assets, and you get JT Miller in here, and you get his 5-year contract when he's 33 years old, and you're saying to JT Miller, "I need you to be my savior right now of this team." JT Miller currently has 26 points on the team. We've played 42 games, and you're giving him the captaincy. And by the way, JT Miller, was a locker room problem in Vancouver. So how is he fixing the culture here? It didn't make a lot of sense at the time. It still doesn't now. And clearly, it has not worked. And clearly, the past 3 games have proven that whatever Chris Jury is thinking of doing is not working. This current situation going on is not working. And this team is not where it should be at all. And you could point to injuries. You could point to players underperforming like Lafreniere, like Mika Zibanejad, like JT Miller, right? And you could hold those guys accountable. But I want to point to 2 things here. After the loss against the Seattle Kraken, which the Rangers had the lead for 2 periods, eventually giving up in the third after a wild shorthanded goal that was given up, JT Miller was asked in the locker room, "What do you think the problem is? What do you think? How do you feel like the team has been playing the past couple of weeks?" Right? Effectively, the question was something along the lines of that. And JT Miller's response was, and again, this is your captain speaking, "I don't know. I can't give you an answer." So there's no accountability. There's no leadership quality. There's no put the blame on me. I'm carrying this on our backs. There's I don't know, Jim. Is effectively the answer from your captain. So ultimately, right there, the culture is gone. There is no culture being created by this group, right? And the second problem is that you're kind of stuck because JT Miller has an anchor contract, meaning he has a no move clause. So he's going to be here. Because Zibanejad has a no move clause. He's going to be here, right? Richard Trocheck is getting paid a lot of money. Shesterkin, Fox, getting paid a lot of money. Alexis Lafreniere getting paid $7 million a year. Just got a 7-year extension, getting paid a lot of money. Hasn't performed at all this year either. So you can't really say that it's easy to move off of these guys and create a whole new roster. So what's Chris Jury going to do? As of today, or yesterday, as I should say, Chris Jury has sent out a letter directed to the fans and to what the plan is. And this is what the letter states. A message from Chris Jury to our fans. We wanted to take a moment and connect our loyal, passionate fan base. We know and feel your disappointment in how the season's gone to this point. We are frustrated when nothing more than to deliver an on-ice product you can be proud of. With us every day, no matter, and the one in the organization is happy with what has transpired. From management to coaches to players over the last few years. We've had some success and moments to cherish, but ultimately it was not the end goal. We're working relentlessly every day to bring a Stanley Cup back to New York because that is what our fans deserve. With our position in the standings and injuries to key players this season, we must be honest and realistic about our situation. We are not going to stand pat. A shift will give us the ability to be smart and opportunistic. We will retool the team. This will not be a rebuild. This will be a retool built around core players and prospects. We will target players that bring tenacity, skill, speed, and winning pedigree with a focus on obtaining young players, draft picks, and cap space to allow us flexibility moving forward. So, one more sentence, and then we'll come back. That may mean saying goodbye to players that have brought us and our fans great moments over the years. These players represent the Rangers with pride and class and will always be part of our family. So a couple of things there. And there's more onto it about, history and whatever, right? A couple of things I want to point out. She said it's a retool, not a rebuild. With this current team, and it's the way it's constructed, how are you retooling and bringing and saying that we're going to retool when you want to trade for draft picks and prospects? That's not a retool. That sounds like a rebuild. In any instance, right? And then you want to say that we're going to have to get rid of some key guys here. Who are you getting rid of? If Mika Zibanejad, JT Miller, Vincent Trocheck, and Alexis Lafreniere, 4 of your biggest contracts are not being moved, who are you moving? I get it. There's like 2 guys you can identify. Tony Panarin on an expiring deal. He's probably gone out the door, right? Some of the veteran guys too. But then how much are you really recouping from that? And granted, the Rangers did this move 5 years ago. Look it up. They did a same exact thing. They sent a letter out to the fans saying, hey, we're going to trade away everybody. And they did. Traded Rick Nash, traded Ryan McDonough, traded Michael Grabner. Right? And that was a shift in the organization. That was a big, big deadline that they did. And they completely changed the whole team around. I don't see that happening here. I think this is more than just a retool. I think everything needs to be torn down. You have to get rid of everything going wrong with the team. Whatever it is, I think JT Miller needs to go. I think you need to bring in a whole new locker room, let Mike Sullivan build the chemistry, build the locker room out, have him build his own culture. Because the one you put in place is still existing from 5 years ago, and that didn't work, and now it's still not working. So what is the issue here? And I'll say one thing before we move on from this topic. JT Miller to me, and I'm talking to you. I want to go through some captains the Rangers had recently. Ryan Callahan wanted to be a Ranger, died wanting to be a Ranger, was a great captain, scored goals, had responsibility, and was a leader. Ryan McDonough was second captain during that time. Ryan McDonough, for those who don't know, in the 2016 playoffs, I want to say, had to put Vaseline into his skating boot because he had a broken foot. And they had to jam that boot into his broken foot so he could play in that playoff game. And there was a game 7. And he ended up playing 27 minutes that had block shots with a broken foot. And they lost that game. Jacob Trouba, for all his faults, for all his terrible defensive mistakes, when push came to shove, he held the team accountable. He would throw his helmet at the bench. He would get into fights for guys. JT Miller, to me, has not shown any leadership quality, any representation of being a captain, any essence of holding anybody accountable on this team, and for all intents and purposes has not shown anything to be a leader for this Ranger team. So you're pegging him to be the savior of this franchise, Chris Drury. You got that one wrong. Very wrong. So I think for the Rangers, they need to kind of really bear down. We'll see what moves happen, what transpires before the deadline, which is happening in first week of March. We'll have the break for the Olympics, and we'll see what goes down. Because this team's going to look different come a month from now. It's going to look very different. Where will it be when the dust settles? Are we going to be back to square one where we were 5 years ago, where the rebuild hasn't worked, and the development of players has not happened, and the young players still are underperforming? Or is it going to get better? With Chris Drury at the helm, under all the fire, under all the siege that he has, this deadline for him is of the utmost importance. This may be the last chance. If it should have been the last chance maybe 5 years ago, it has to be it now. So we'll see where the Rangers end up there. But moving on from them, we're going to look to another team in the Metro, another team that's kind of been on the edge, kind of been teetering. The New Jersey Devils, 24 and 21, 6 in the Metropolitan. Currently sit, I believe, let me just get this right. I believe they sit 3 points out of a playoff spot, of a wild card spot. Excuse me, 4 points out of a wild card spot, on 50 points. And look, I think a lot of people peg this Devil team as being one of the premier teams in the league. You know, they brought in Sheldon Keefe, who was a brand new head coach, veteran coach in Toronto, known for winning. You had Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, Dougie Hamilton. You have a lot of key guys here. And look, the Devils they're a good team. You know, Jesper Brad's having a really career year, Brendan Dillon. You had the injury to Jack Hughes. That sucked. That hurt. But I think you're looking at other guys who are just not performing, right? Timo Meier getting 12 goals. That's really nothing too crazy to look at. Steven Nosen hasn't really done anything this year. Cody Glass has 10 goals, which is actually pretty good. But the real problem for me with this Devil team is their goaltending. Jacob Markstrom has not been all that. A +3 goals against. And then Jake Allen has been really no better. They both split time in net. And I think to win in this league, you need a goaltender. You need a premier goaltender, right? You can get away with it if you have 2 premier players, like the Edmonton Oilers do, when you have McDavid and Draisaitl, who are elite. But the Devils don't have that. They don't. And, Jack Hughes not being there for most of the year hurts them. So they're in an awkward position, right, come this time of year. Because this is the time of year where teams finally decide whether or not they're going to be buyers or sellers, right? And I think the Devils are kind of a tweener, right? It has been a great year. Your goaltending's not good. You don't really have the assets of young players to trade for to bring in premier guys. Maybe you have the picks. But you're sitting just out of a playoff spot, and the East is absolutely brutal. Absolutely brutal. So there is no guarantee that you can get in, even if you make a push. But I think if you're the Devils, right, I think you've built a team that you believe in and offensively that can get there. That can get to that point where they are going to make the playoffs. They are going to make a run. They are going to perform well. And they have played well, but they haven't performed to the level maybe they should be, right? So it's a tough call. I think if they could bring in a goaltender with some consistency, if they could bring in a goaltender that can get them some wins, they can go on a run here. They're basically a week out from a playoff spot, They're a week away, is what I like to say. They're a week away. But it's been weird. Their goaltending has been the main issue. Defensively, they've been okay statistically, and offensively, outside of Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier, really haven't been performing. So I wouldn't be surprised also if they're sellers. I wouldn't be surprised if a team just say, it wasn't our year. It happens all the time in the NHL. Look at the Winnipeg Jets. First place in the NHL last year to last place. It happens. Teams implode. And they go again next year. I think if you have a chance to trade some assets, bring in some draft capital, try to run it back next year, maybe you go sign a goaltender in the offseason, I think you have a good enough team to compete. But I feel like this year, especially with defensively and goaltending wise, they gave up 9 goals to the Islanders recently. Like, this team is not equipped in the playoffs right now to compete. I think teams like Carolina, Pittsburgh, the Islanders, even Boston, even Washington are better than them. And I think even if they do make the playoffs and make a run, whatever it is, I don't see them really being competitive in the playoffs. So I would say that, surprisingly, a team that we all pegged to kind of be first place in the Metro and really kind of dominate teams with speed and skill is going to end up being sellers. Now, whether Sheldon Keefe is going to be responsible for that, it's going to be up to determination. But it's something to look at. This is a very healthy NHL because there's a lot of teams here that are relatively new, that are on the up and up, that are becoming really well, and teams that were successful in the past are struggling. And I think we're going to see a lot of key movement at the deadline for teams that maybe were thinking we're going to be great and are not. So just wanted to highlight the Devils real quick because they're a really interesting case and a really interesting showcase of what the league is like right now. And then to kind of close it out, because we're kind of pushed against time, I don't want to be here too long. I want to highlight a fun game. I want to highlight this game happened literally yesterday. Wasn't on my radar until it actually happened. It ended up being a really fun game. The Toronto Maple Leafs played the Vegas Golden Knights in Vegas. This is what's being dubbed the Mitch Marner Bowl. So for those who don't know, Mitch Marner was a former player on Toronto Maple Leafs. A really talented player, really skilled player. Was up for debate as to whether or not he should re-sign with Toronto. Because Toronto really was lacking skill players, they were lacking goal scorers. Mitch Marner was that. But he also wasn't at the level of being a playoff performer. He kind of shied away from games, he disappeared sometimes, and was kind of like a regular season hero, postseason zero type of thing. So there really was a big debate, but I think all the people felt like Mitch Marner should be coming back, and they should be kind of in that same situation. But Toronto did not spend the money, did not pay for Mitch Marner, and the Vegas Golden Knights did. So Mitch Marner, this is the Marner Bowl, kind of a fun dub for it. But anyway, this game ended up being really fun. Toronto had a lead throughout the majority of the game, up until the last 10 minutes where Vegas started coming back, and it wasn't until literally with under 10 seconds on the clock, Tomas Hertl ended up getting the game-tying goal. And then, 1 second, as I try to find who got the game-winning goal, because I have the memory of a crawfish. It was Jack Eichel. Of course it was. Jack Eichel ended up getting the game-winning goal in overtime to get the win for the Vegas Golden Knights, getting then the second point. But overall, just a fun game to kind of watch the highlights of. Back and forth action, great hockey action. Flying up and down the ice, you have last-minute dramatics. And again, like, you had a really, really fun showcase of what hockey is and what it can be in a place like Vegas, of all places. And Toronto this year, they've kind of been meh. Again, a really, really team with a lot of expectations put on them. Really haven't been showing up that well. Again, which is like what else is new, Toronto. But this year, it could hurt them because of how competitive the East is. They're in that final wildcard spot, but is that good enough for them? Probably not. Montreal looks a lot better. Detroit is looking really good. Tampa Bay is looking really good. So Toronto, and you have the best player in America in Austin Matthews. I'm sorry, second best player, Austin Matthews. I just saw Brady Tkachuk absolutely run rampant on the Rangers ice. Brady Tkachuk is probably the best American player right now, in my opinion. But you have, you still got John Tavares. You got Willem Nylander, who's now hurt, so that's gonna suck for them. That's gonna make things a lot tougher. Max Domi really didn't show up in this game. Then for Vegas, Vegas is just an absolute unit right now. I mean, They always are. They're always a competitive team. They're always a fun team. Clearly, it's worked. They're first place in their division, the Pacific, on 58 points. They're probably going to win that. Jack Eichel has been a bomb trade, great trade for them. And overall, like the Golden Knights are just a very, very fun team to watch. They're well coached, well disciplined. They never give up on any game. Um, yeah, they're going to be a real threat in the playoffs this year. They have a really solid team. Obviously, we talk about Mitch Marner, we talk about Mark Stone, we talk about Riley Smith. You have Jack Eichel there as well. Defensively, Noah Hannafin's been a beast. Shea Theodore's always a great, great player. Zach Whiteclard's really good. Their problem's going to be their goaltending. Carter Hart just went out for an injury, so hopefully he gets back healthy. Aiden Hill is not all that, so it's going to come down to their offense to try to get them into games and win games for them. But this was a really, really, really fun game to kind of watch for the first Marner Bowl. For both teams as well, very important game. Points matter right now. So overall, just was a very fun Thursday game, random Thursday game that happened on the schedule. Um, that came across my radar. So shout out to both teams. And then looking forward to the next week in the NHL, a couple of fun games that are going to be highlighted. Wednesday, you have a good original six matchup uh, between the Toronto Maple Leafs and Detroit Red Wings. That's always a fun matchup. You have the Red Wings who are red hot right now. Toronto is kind of licking their wounds a little bit from this Vegas loss, but still a really good team. So that should be a lot of fun. And then also next Friday, literally a week from now, we have the Marner Bowl Part 2 in Toronto, which I'm sure Marner can get booed out of the arena there. So that's going to be fun. And yeah, I think there's a lot of fun games also coming up throughout the schedule this week. We'll keep an eye on those games as well. But we're really looking out for Toronto and Detroit on Wednesday, and then the repeat Marner Bowl on Friday. So it's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of great teams, a lot of great hockey going on right now. As we gear up for the Olympics, as we gear up for the trade deadline, things are moving fast and furious. So that's going to do it for me. Thank you guys for listening and watching. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Make sure you check out our socials to get back on TikTok and Instagram. Make sure you subscribe to the page. Or leave a comment. What do you want to talk about? What do you want to talk about? Whatever. Let me know. Watch hockey. It's fun. It's great. Thank you guys for listening. I've been Daniel. We'll see you guys next week. Peace.